Hello, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. Ed, how are you doing, man? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah. How are you?
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming to our podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you with us. So, Ed, tell me about yourself. When did you start? When did the first sparkle of music lit up in your mind and you thought, okay, let's go. Let's do music.
It's really hard to say. I think like it started seeping in for me like going on car journeys with my parents when I was younger. Like we had like every Saturday, for example, like I'd have to just tag along with my dad who had to do like various bits and bats and like his errands for the day. So we jump in the car, but like it was always like what music they threw on the stereo. Like my parents were quite interested in, and they had like a big variety of music that they always put on. So it was like the drives to all these various places, like when my sister went uni and stuff, like these drives were always filled with like, oh, like this is Frank Zappa, like this is his story, like this is what he kind of thought. And they'd be like, oh, cool. But then like my mum was a little bit more subtle, and she'd have like Motown compilations, and like she put on like Motown and like smooth soul and stuff, and we just kind of sit in silence. But like I didn't really, I wasn't conscious that I was becoming a like musically orientated person at the time. It was just like we just sit in the car, and music was like a big part of how we did the time of the drive kind of thing.
Are you coming from a musical family?
No, not really. No, I think they just loved it. Like they just love music. Like my dad can sing, but like he was never a singer. Like he's never had to like perform kind of thing. My mum's like NHS. She started out as a nurse. Like no like musical background there. I think it's just like the osmosis of just how much music we absorbed. Like they clearly just loved it. Purely like as without any sort of training or like ulterior motives. They both just love music, so it was something that we just always kind of like had on kind of thing.
Okay.
And then it just seeps in through the years, I guess.
I think this is one of the things that you probably maybe struggled with in the beginning, and I'm sure a lot of musicians are struggling with being able to say, okay, I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a sound engineer, artist, producer, so who am I exactly?
It feels like you've picked a thought out of my head that I've like really been struggling with for the past couple of years.
Okay.
It's so true, isn't it? Because it's like, yeah, like...
Because the thing is, I think,
struggle with that massively.
You always say from the time that you start doing something, whether it's going to be like playing piano or whether it's going to be like being a sound engineer, you're showing some interest, you're trying to learn. Can I call myself a sound engineer at the time that I begin doing something?
Yeah.
But like even down the line in 20 years, there is still a lot to learn. So can I still call myself a sound engineer?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's but I think it's definitely a journey.
Of course.
So how do you describe yourself?
See, like if I'm just going to be like, totally honest, like it just depends who you're talking to, because like everyone sees the world through a lens, and it's like if you're having a conversation with someone and they don't know the first thing about what a sound engineer is, it's like, oh well, it's like I work in music. Then if you like talk to someone who's like really into the sound, it's like, yeah, so I kind of like more focus on the audio engineering side of things, and like it just depends on like how deep the conversation is going to go.
Yeah, the language is different, right?
Exactly.
The language is different. I agree 100%.
But then it's like if I'm just alone with my own thoughts, it's just like, look, I'm just a human being. Like I just do what makes me like passionate. You know what I mean? I just do what lights the fire, and like I just do what I think is right. And it's like that overarching thing is just like I'm just a human being. But then, like you say, you have to put these things on yourself for like other people to understand you.
Sure.
Which it's an empathy thing, but it's like I don't go around like floating titles like really hardcore like some people. It's just if I'm talking to someone I've never met him before, you establish those common grounds. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm really into music. It's like, oh, me too, I play in a band. It's like, oh right, then you
start to click,
you're going down an avenue, but it's like at the end of the day, I'm just a human being that does what they care about.
Sure. Appreciate the humbleness. But from a professional standpoint, obviously, as you brought it up as well, when you want to put yourself out there, and from a professional and promotional standpoint, you want to say, I do this as a job, and I got in a studio. How do you describe yourself?
So I'm an audio engineer and mastering engineer, and then a record producer, kind of in that order. And those are my main three crafts. That is my trade, and that is what I offer to artists and people.
Do you play instruments? Do you?
Yeah, I'm near enough a lifelong musician now. I started on guitar, and I can call myself a guitarist like comfortably, and then I can dabble on other instruments just for like other people's sake, or if a song needs like a bit of texture or something like that. But yeah, it was music before audio for me.
Musicians that are starting music and they start performing, or even I think as a sound engineer, they might have like a second job. Right? Tell me about the time that you were starting out and you didn't have a studio. How was it? And how did you manage to survive financially?
It's been like peaks and troughs for me. So for example, just a few years ago, I think it was like 2018 when I was getting Also Mastering House set up. I worked as a waiter for 2 years, and I was like 26 when I was doing that.
Sure.
And I'd been an audio engineer for like maybe 8 years at that point in time. And it's like, look, I've got to take this step to the side, save up some money and just do a minimum wage job. And it's like, that as an example is kind of how it's been for me, like quite a lot on and off. Like I'd say the last 4, 5, somewhere around 5 years, like is the longest stretch that I've had personally, like as a full-time person in music. And it's like, it's tough. Like you've got to be so like gritty to get through it. Cause like, I think what, upcoming musicians and like people in that position of like branching away from like the job to like full-time music, like I think that's something really important that they need to know is like, you've got to know how to grit through periods of strife. Like you're not gonna come like out of employment and be a full-time musician and have a steady ream of work constantly for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Like it's just not gonna happen that way. So you're gonna come, like you might have a big job, then you might have nothing for weeks, and then you might have like a tiny little job.
COVID might hit and you might not have a job for 2 years.
Yeah, don't get me started. Don't get me started. I think quite a lot of us have been through that path of where you have to, just work a job, do what you have to do in order to like get the finances and resources behind you before going full time. But then once you go full time, like you introduced to new challenges and like you're introduced to like different problems that you have to solve, and that's like kind of what sends a lot of people back out of the music industry, is because it can just be exceptionally hard and you have to be very gritty like during those years.
What does music mean to you?
I mean, it means everything to me. It's been my entire life. About 80% of my life experience and life has been like around music. Like I did it straight out of school, finished my GCSEs, and like I've just been in music since. So it means everything to me. Like it just depends like what aspect of music we're talking about. Like just like raw listening enjoyment, like you say, like the escapism, like that is kind of the pinnacle of music. Like that's why we're all interested in it. That's like what brings us to it, is that moment that music can give you, like where you just kind of meander out of reality and just get like lost in the world of music. But then music also means to me like it's a job as well. Like it's 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 a little bit more clinical in that sense as well. So it can mean a lot of things to me depending on which aspect of music we're talking about.
Did you study music?
Yeah, I did. So I did an Access to Music BTEC course. That was like straight out of high school. So like in the UK, like the high school system is you finish after your GCSEs, like you're usually around 15, 16 years old. and then you enroll in like college, which is usually 2 or 3 years, and then university, which is usually like 3 or 8 years, depending on what you're doing. So straight out of high school, I did the Access to Music course at Blackburn College, and it was kind of like an all-encompassing kind of course where you kind of, one module's business, one module's music theory, and then another sound engineering, and it was kind of like a broad scope into music as a whole, and like as an industry, and all like the various different jobs that you can go into in the industry. So I did that for 2 years, and then after that was when I decided, like, yeah, I'm gonna sort of specialize down the audio route. And then after I was done with like my audio education, I went back to music education, like privately. And just like started seeing like a classical teacher like once every week for like half an hour, and just like getting my head back into theory, and like, because I've always played music, so I was like, oh well, you know, I'm probably at a stage now where like I can appreciate like the music side of it a little bit more. So went there for, I think it was like 3 or 4 years, and got up to about grade 5 theory, and that was when I kind of like just had to cap it out and just say, like, you know, like, there's no massive utility like in me progressing past this. But then at the end of that, I did my grade 8 contemporary guitar as well, and I think I did that in like my mid-20s. So I stopped education about 7 years ago, but I was in education for on and off like maybe like 10 years or something.
How was your experience in university and college, and did it help you to become the person you are, the sound engineer, the mastering engineer you are now?
Yeah, it definitely did. But on your point is like, you know, the outcome of education is like the knowledge that you get. And it's like, if you can take in knowledge, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Like, if you can take in knowledge and it's important to you and it changes your behavior and it's like, it has a positive impact on you, like that information doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's university or whether it's YouTube, you know what I mean? Like it all sort of counts. My experience of university and college is like, how do I explain it? It's just a bit like, well, yeah, it is what it is. Like, I think the model of it has flaws, like, in 2 directions. So like the model of it has a flaw in that it can be really slow. Like, you can cover a lot of things like way too slowly. Like in 6 months, you might cover like X amount of modules. Whereas like if you were being a realist, you might have been able to do that in a month, really, if you like really did it. But at the same time,
slow process, yeah.
The other problem, which is the other side of the coin, is like, yeah, but it's gonna take you 10 years to really understand that and like fully like absorb that and know how to apply it and like understand the nuances of it.
Yeah.
So it's like, on the one hand, yeah, you can understand something like that.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you can't.
I think there is a quote from Bruce Lee that I'm not afraid of someone who's got 10,000 different techniques. I'm afraid of someone who's practiced one technique 10,000 times.
Yeah.
So that kind of a thing. Yeah, I agree. You've been working in industry for 15 years now, right?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go back in time and do it all over again, would you do it differently? Process.
I mean, definitely. If I could put my brain now into 17-year-old's brain and it just worked like that, then 100% I'd do loads differently.
Okay.
But I think, you know,
what are the main points that you would do differently?
I've always had this problem of like, I'll hit my head up against a brick wall. Like, I will just go at something, and like that's kind of like in my nature. But when I was younger, like, I'd go too hard at things, but because I like could sleep and recover quickly, like it never occurred to me like that you can damage yourself and that you can like burn out really badly, and that never occurred for like a long time. So I treated myself like very harshly for between the ages of about 17 up to about 26. Like, I treated myself very harshly. It was like, you've got to, you know, tour for 3 months. Now you're back. You've got to do this. You got to do this. And it's like,
you're very disciplined and determined from a very early age then.
Yeah. But
okay.
if I could go back and like guide it a little bit more gently and
Okay.
make like a little bit less unnecessary sacrifice at
Okay.
times. Like those are the things I would change, but at the same time, it's like, well, butterfly effect, isn't it? Like I could go and change all that, and then fast forward to when I'm my age now, and it's like, yeah, but
It might be a different
you
you.
didn't really try hard enough, did you? So you kind of can't win.
True. In that kind of age range, you're in the mindset that you're trying things to understand what's right and what's not right, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And just the fact that you were disciplined and you were determined, I think probably the most important elements to be able to make it and gets you the places that you want to get.
It doesn't, always work to be like disciplined and like hard on yourself. It just depends on your path and your attributes really, and like what opens up to you and kind of, what happens. Like you were telling me when you were at sound school, the thing that appealed to you the most was like, oh well, I get to network with people and like I get to like socialize, and now here you are like making a podcast. It's like that's your nature.
Sure.
That's your nature, man.
Sure. How was your parents' reaction to you showing interest to music?
Credit to them, like they've completely, for the most part, just like let me do it kind of thing. I think like a privilege that I had growing up was that if it was like midnight or 1 a.m, like I could get an acoustic guitar and I could just like start messing with it, and like no one's gonna come running in the room and like demand it's sleep time now, like you have to stop that. Like they very much kind of let me explore my nature around music, and that is like a total sort of like privilege to own as a human.
Absolute privilege. Yeah. Absolutely.
But there's been a lot of times where the sacrifice and the hardships of the industry, they've like very much been freaked out by, like kind of like, is this a good idea? Like maybe you should do this, maybe you should get a 9 to 5. Like the amount of times my mum's like pushed me into getting office work in the NHS, and like I've done it like from time to time.
Have you done it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, she and parents in general, for the most part,
they
just want
of course.
Exactly.
They want the best for you, but as you said, everybody's looking at life from their own lens.
Yes.
Even if they're your parents, their concerns are still through their own lenses that they see the world, right? So you were saying?
Yeah. So I think like it's not been a smooth ride kind of thing. So in that respect, it's freaked them out. But in terms of like, support and understanding, like they've just been 10 out of 10.
How do you feel about all these AI technology coming along, that mastering online, mixing online, all these VSTs?
Yeah. Feeling, emotion is like neither here nor there. Like it kind of doesn't really bother me, because I think it's also like my empathy lies with the artist who is accessing the services. It's like Levande, for example, is like the mastering and the online mastering AI. Mate, it costs like £6 to get a track done. If you're looking at like a mastering engineer who's got 20 years experience and like £1 million worth of equipment, and they cost like £60 for one track, and you're looking at Levande and it's like £6, and like you don't have much money, and all that matters to you is just getting the result and like making the music. It's like, do what works for you.
So you see it as a positive thing then?
I don't see it as a positive or a negative.
Okay.
What I will say is AI based technology in audio engineering is always needs correction, because like what AI can never do, I mean, maybe I take this back in another 50 years, but to my eyes now, what I understand about it is what AI can never do is absorb context. So AI is problem solving, but it can never it never knows why you boosted 2K. It never knows what you were hearing at 2K. It just knows that it's there, and if it brings it back, it's very likely to inhibit like natural human frequency response.
Mm.
So it's like it's an equation and it's good and it's based on solid logic. But when you get really deep into like what you're actually sort of doing in the studio and what you're doing with music, you'll find things like that just frustrating. Like I'm a very manual person now. I've tried a lot of different sort of technologies and plugins over the years, especially like on the AI side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always come back to feeling frustrated because it doesn't understand the context, so I have to go back and manually do what it's supposed to be doing. So I may as well have just done the job manually to begin with. That's been my experience. So for example, Slate Trigger, brilliant piece of software, never understands the context of what a transient is. So because it reads raw transients, it wants to align to a strong transient.
Mm-hmm.
But the strong transient isn't necessarily the area that you're trying to sample replace. Plus, after delay compensation, it's always a few samples out. So it's like it's a brilliant piece of technology, but it needs correction by hand. And then AIs come along and plugin companies come along and it's like they sing their own praises of being like, you know, perfect sample alignment. It's like, better than it was before in terms of like the result that they produce, but not as good as if a person did it. Because they just don't understand the context of it. So practically, technically, I think they're still quite a long way behind a human being. Some AI stuff, like there's a plugin called Soothe, which is absolutely like just a phenomenal plugin. But because of the way that you interface with it, you give the plugin less responsibility for the actual task. So it's got like the blend function on it. So what it does is it reads like resonant peaks and then it suppresses them. But because you've got a blend, you can like sort of choose the amount of how much you want that to be applied. So that's like a brilliant tool in and of itself. If you just load up Soothe and you don't do anything to it and you just let it be an AI, it's not going to understand what you want it to do.
Sure.
So
as long as it's got parameters that you can
yeah,
change and tweak and
yeah,
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 I
exactly.
understand.